Hi, I'm Carissa, and this week I chose to watch a YouTube article or a YouTube video, and it was called "Adventures in English." Language registers lesson. And so it was actually a lesson, but it was really entertaining, put on by some people trying to explain the different types of registers. And so this really reflected the Finnegan text, chapter 10, talking about language registers and what is appropriate during what setting, what kind of language to use, since there are so many different kinds. The ones that they covered are frozen language, such as like the Pledge of Allegiance or other things that you would recite and you would not change. Formal, which would be like a class lecture. Professional or academic, like a teacher-student conversation, or maybe with your boss. And this one I had some thoughts on that I'll talk about later. Casual would be like with your friends or your family, and intimate would be like with a parent and child or a husband and wife relationship. So the main point in this was to know when to use which type of register when it's appropriate. Now, teaching EL students, and really all students, especially since I teach first grade, I feel like some of these might be a little bit difficult to teach because the formal one, like a class lecture, or the professional or academic one that they really tried to hit hard, I don't really feel is completely appropriate, because in my classroom, and I think in most classrooms, the goal is to create a relationship between the students and the teacher so that the students and the teacher both feel comfortable. I use proper English, but I don't speak in a proper authoritative formal, I guess, way to my students, not just because they're in first grade, but because I'm trying to promote a relationship between us, even when I'm teaching an actual lesson. Yes, I'm going to, like I said, use appropriate English, but I'm not going to be super formal. So I feel like the casual part needs to come more into play. And I think that's important with teaching ELs, because that's really the way that they're going to talk the majority of the time. Now, I will say that there is some slang that might not be completely appropriate, or that you need to know, or at least be aware that different generations especially might not understand what you're talking about if you're using slang. So I think that's important to point out to students, including ELLs, that if you are using casual language, not everybody's going to understand you. If it's somebody you're meeting for the first time, if you're in an interview situation, definitely I wouldn't use slang. Now, if you're having a casual conversation as part of the interview, then that's okay to be a little more casual, but still I wouldn't use a lot of slang, and try to be as proper as you can. But you need to be relatable as a person. So I feel like there's a fine line there, and I think that might be the hard part to explain to kids, especially ELs, of when it's okay and when it's not okay, because you kind of have to use your own judgment. And the other thing is, especially kids that, depending on how they speak at home, and so when you're trying to explain the difference about why at school it might not be appropriate to speak that way to certain adults, they don't really get it. And so when you're trying to explain the difference and say, well, that just doesn't sound right, or that's not proper, if that's not what's being modeled at home, then they're not going to understand why that's not okay, because that's just the way they talk. So I think as they get older, that might be something a little bit more to emphasize, especially because that's kind of like a career or work type skill that they need to learn, like when they're going in interviews and such, or especially like in college and things like that, or maybe high school classes even a little bit. But even then, I think that relationship, that teacher-student relationship, is really important, and you're not going to get that if you're trying to be formal all the time. So that was my biggest takeaway, and that's really my lingering question too, is what's the boundary? And, do you agree that you need to be a little bit more casual at times with your students to create those relationships? Because I think you can be casual and teach as long as you've got rules and procedures established. The way that you speak, I think, can be a little bit flexible. So that's my lingering question.